Heyo folks, and welcome to Math Looks Back At, a series where I take a look at the often underrated and forgotten animation of yesteryear. Today, I will be looking back at Disney's The Black Cauldron. I can hear you already. Let me answer what you're going to say right now. Why are you looking at Black Cauldron? It's a Disney movie. It's a very well-known movie in a lot of circles. Things of that nature. Well, this is a movie that, despite it being by Disney, was a bomb. A spectacular failure from them. And because of that, Disney has sort of pushed this movie off into a corner and tried, intentionally or not, to forget about it. You would actually be surprised how many people either don't know this movie or do know of it but have never actually seen it, because it is hard to find. Disney, being Disney, doesn't release their stuff that often to begin with, but this movie in particular, they have just flat out not done anything with. I think it's gotten 2, maybe 3 releases, and that's it. 1 for VHS and a couple for DVD. Now, this is going to be a little bit odd because I really have no major complaints with this movie at all. So I'm going to save you some time. It's a good movie. You should go watch it. What I will be discussing, for the most part, is why this movie failed as badly as it did. Because that's one of the things that I find interesting, is how a movie that, even if it is really good, can fail so horribly like this did, even if it's from a big company that generally does not fail. There are, and I will be saying some points about the movie that I don't like during this, so there will be some negative critique in this as well. But as I said, generally speaking, I have no real big problems with this movie. This is one of the better movies for animation for any time period that I've ever watched. Now, there are 2 major reasons why I think this movie did as badly as it did, and they're both relatively related. The first is the time in which it was released. It was released in 1985, so it had been, Disney being Disney, this had been in production for probably 3-4 years, if I had to take a guess. The quality of the animation shows on this. That's why I'm assuming it was in production as long as it was. Before the 90s, Disney had a habit of taking several years on their animation to get it as perfect as they possibly could. That's not saying anything bad about their future films, but old school Disney did it more long term to try and pin that down. They didn't have the process for doing it good and doing it fast like they did later on during the Renaissance period. As I said, the animation in this, beautiful, stunning. It holds up masterfully for today. The story, kind of mediocre. It's not bad. It's kind of generic D&D style, boy comes from village, boy saves world. I don't think that's a spoiler at this point. This is Disney we're talking about. So that's one of the reasons. By the way, that did help as to why it failed, but it was still a decent story for what it was. So that could not have been one of the major contributing factors. So I'm just putting that off to the side that the story was kind of mediocre. The time at which it came out at, the story that they used for it was rather dark. I don't mean dark by Disney standards. I mean dark by animation standards. oh, but Secret of Nim came out in '82. How is this dark compared to that? You'd be correct. '85 was a few years after Secret of Nim. So that people would have, you'd expect them to be used to a darker style of movie for animation, and this wouldn't have been as much of a shock as Secret of Nim was. Secret of Nim was just absolutely mind-blowing how dark it was and how mature they felt the audiences could be. That's kind of Bluth's thing. He always did that. So part of me thinks that this movie was somewhat in response to that, but I think that this was in production even before Secret of Nim came out. So I think that this was Disney trying to actually go a different direction than they normally did. The audience, technically speaking, they received it better than they did Secret of Nim. This movie in the box office made $22 million. Secret of Nim made only 14. The difference being budget. Secret of Nim cost $7 million to make. It made $14 million. So it, from most financial perspectives, if you include marketing, it probably broke even. This movie, Black Cauldron, made $22 million in theaters. It cost $44 to make. $44 million for the mid-'80s is insanely expensive in general. For an animated movie, this was almost unheard of. Disney put their money where their mouth was, so to speak. They wanted to try something new. They put a lot of effort into it. It shows. The visual animation in this is spectacular. The backgrounds are beautiful. The orchestra is absolutely phenomenal. One of the best soundtracks for any kind of fantasy-style movie you will ever hear, animated or not. So then, if people were used to, or growing used to, a more darker tone from their animated films, why is that one of the two major points? Well, point one leads into point two, and this one is the bigger one. It was a Disney movie. This, as I said, had been released in the mid-'80s. By that point, whether through intention or whether through public perception, Disney had sort of been painted as the kid-friendly group, the very children's-appropriate animated studio. People weren't expecting this from Disney. When this movie came out, everyone, pretty much every review I've ever seen on the day or from the day that it was reviewed had the mention that they were not expecting this from a Disney movie, or this feels odd from Disney, or things of that nature. They note that this felt weird from the studio. And as much as I don't like that does play a part, it does play a part. I would never look at it like that. I would think of each movie as its own, regardless of who made it. But reviewers of the day, and even to this day, generally don't seem to think that way. They tend to focus in how other movies from the same studio have done and compare that. So this movie being as dark as it was from Disney, a studio that had never done that, or they had, I mean, fucking Bambi, for Pete's sake. Disney got dark. Disney didn't get this dark all the time, though. They got dark in moments. They had sad scenes. They didn't build dark worlds. They didn't build dark storylines and atmospheres. This entire movie was dark. That's something Disney had never done before. That's something people weren't expecting from Disney, and that colored their perception of it. That colored the reviews of it. That affected how it did in the box office. So it was this weird combination of it being dark and from Disney in the mid 80s. Had either one of these not been the case, I think that the movie would have succeeded. Had it been released by a different studio, I think it would have succeeded. Well, let me rephrase this. Had all things been equivalent, and the only thing that changed was it was from a different studio, no storyline elements changed, no animation quality changed, nothing. Had it all been the same, but it was released by a different studio, I think that it would have succeeded far more than it did in the day. That really affected Disney. They took that as a sign that they should not do these kind of movies, and that helped shape into their Renaissance era. It was this and a couple. I think the movie before it and the movie, especially the movie after it, really painted to them a picture of what people wanted from them, and they went forward with that, and that's what led to their Renaissance period. Had this movie succeeded, which I think it honestly should have, we might see a very different Disney than we do today. I could not imagine that. I don't want to get into all of those possibilities right here. That would take far too long. My point being that the reason that this movie did not succeed and has not gotten as much attention since is because of the studio that made it and the tone of the movie rather than the actual quality of the movie itself. This has happened before with other movies. It probably will still happen in the future with further movies. I hate when this happens because it can cripple really good movies. They just get a bad perception to them and they're tossed away because of that. This is definitely one of those movies that you should watch. It's really hard to find because Disney washed their hands of it. If you can find it, you should pick it up. It is, in every sense of the term, worth it. You will enjoy this movie. It is something that every animation buff should watch at least once in their life. It's not only a quality film in itself, it's a great lesson. It's a lesson in how your perception as a studio and the mentality of the day can really affect a movie more than it should. That's something that people need to take into account, unfortunately. And I would like to not see that be a factor, but this is a very good case study for what will happen or what probably would happen in those kind of cases. Anyway, this has been me rambling a bit more about how a movie can have outside factors affect it more than the actual movie itself. Like I said, I didn't really have much to talk about with Black Cauldron itself because it is good and I have so few complaints about it. If you can find it, pick it up. Definitely watch it online if you have the chance. You will not be disappointed, I can promise you that. It's been Math Machine looking at honestly an odd case study for how the audience of the day, how their perception can affect a movie, whether it's good or not. Peace out.